Thank you for joining us on the Winning at Selling podcast. I'm Bill Hellkamp of Reach Development Systems, and with me is Professor Scott Plum of the Minnesota Sales Institute.
Do you remember your first sales manager? What did they do that worked, and what lessons did you learn from their mistakes? Too often, sales managers are created for the wrong reasons and lead the sales team into unsuccessful territory. But that won't happen to you because you are a listener and a learner. So get out your talking pad as Bill and I welcome our guest and selling expert, Mike Weinberg, to discuss the key to success as your first-time sales manager on episode 587 of the Winning at Selling podcast.
Well, we got no book club today because we always like to make as much time available for our guests as we can. Next week, we will be back into Spin Selling by Neil Rackham. We've cut chapter 4 into 2 parts, so this will be pages 88 through 98, finishing up chapter 4. Scott, take it away.
Yeah, did you pick up that talking pad? Did you pick up who I was emulating? Or
I never listened to
Mike?
That. Yeah.
Did you pick up the tone? That was Zig Ziglar. So I got out my talking pad and I worked out the problem in front of the prospect at the kitchen table from my Look and Cook cookware. But those are the tapes back from the 70s and 80s. But we're really grateful to have Mike Weinberg with us. Mike loves sales. He is a consultant, coach, speaker, and best-selling author of the First Time Manager Sales book. He specializes in new business development and sales management is on a mission to simplify sales and create high-performance sales people and sales team. Mike is known for his practical approach and for calling it like it is. He works with companies in all industries, ranging from sizes from a few million to many billions of dollars in revenue, and has spoken and consulted on 5 continents. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Mike, thanks for being with us on the show.
I'm already blown away that in the first 30 seconds, you managed to get Neil Rackham and Zig Ziglar into this episode. I'm like, well, what am I doing?
We never had a good idea of our own. So
these are true sales professionals listening to our show.
Oh, you haven't been able to teach in Antarctica yet.
Yeah, no, I have. I'm not, that's correct. And I don't think I'm going to get there. So, but it's great to be with you. I'm so honored. Thanks for the invite and looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah. I think Bill and I were talking before the show, and I think Bill's got a great question that kind of sets up the whole context and the wonder of the sales manager versus a salesperson. So, Bill, do you want to start off?
Sure, I'll start off. Yeah. Well, I often see companies, they take their champion salesperson and they say, "You're so good at sales, let's make you a sales manager." And that doesn't always seem to work out. What are the factors? If I'm going to be made a sales manager, if I have a desire to become sales manager, what should I work on? Where should I get started? Being good at sales, I think, is important, but it's not the only factor.
Oh my goodness. Let's just jump into the deep end right here to begin with. Like,
exactly why I gave it to him. Set it up.
Yeah, I know. Way to throw the softball.
Never happens.
And I'll weave this in throughout the conversation, but I was a rock star salesperson and I was a miserable sales leader my first year in management.
Mm-hmm.
Because what nobody tells you, and this is what's sad, and this is part of why I wrote the book, nobody tells you that the jobs are polar opposites, except for the word sales. There's almost nothing similar between the 2 jobs. And that leads to all kinds of craziness when you get in the job. Aside from being overwhelmed and trying to do everybody's job for them or getting them to sell like you, the reality was most people, including myself, did not understand that you have to go from this very different mindset where you can be selfish and winning on your own versus becoming selfless and learning how to win through your people.
Right.
And I was not prepared for that. And no one is as much success as I had as a sales hunter. And I was coming off 4 great years in coaching and consulting. I didn't really understand that the manager's job was to win through his or her people. And because I was so good at being selfish with my time and taking care of myself and being responsible for my own numbers, when I brought that mentality into the sales management role, it really hurt me early on. So when you ask, which is a great question, what should someone be working on if they're looking to make the move from sales into sales management? And I don't think every top producing salesperson should even be considering that move. And in fact, I've had some friends write me after they've read this new book and said, "You've affirmed my decision to stay as an individual contributor." Because I like, and this is my phrase, but I like the fun, the freedom, the financial rewards. I don't want the politics, the admin, the crap, and having to deal with all this other stuff in management that I didn't realize. It's more than just the ego. So long answer to get to this direct answer to your question. If someone wants to make that transition from individual contributor into leadership, they should be working on their leadership skills and learning about coaching and accountability and subduing your ego and how to create a team of rivals and all the different things that are important for someone who's going to lead a high-powered sales organization.
It's interesting. I'm a sports fan. I think you are too, based on the book that I've read so far. Kirby Puckett, I just loved him when he was playing baseball, and I remember an interview with him. And they said, Kirby, how can you hit the ball so well? He goes, ball's just that big, man. It's just that big. It just comes in and just hit it. And I thought, this is why he would never be a good coach. He has absolutely no idea why he hits well. And that's why somebody like Tom Kelly was a great coach. He got a cup of coffee in the big leagues as a player, just barely hanging on. He had to learn how to play baseball well and then what he could teach. And that's why I think sometimes the real good sellers, they don't even know why they sell so well. They can't transmit it. They can't translate it into the guy that's struggling because they just can't understand it. And I love your idea of selfless versus selfish, because that's true. They're selfish and they don't even know why it works.
I totally agree with you. It's a massive transition. And today, and this is part of the reason why I think I have so much sales training business, there's very little mentoring going on between sales managers and salespeople.
Yeah.
Because most sales managers live in a constant state of overwhelm because their bosses, the C-suite, have completely lost sight of what I would argue are the sales manager's primary responsibilities and high payoff activities. So the managers today become spreadsheet and CRM jockeys, and they're sitting on virtual meeting after virtual meeting, and they're getting yelled at and sent spreadsheets by CFOs. And they work 60 hours a week and they process 200 emails a day. But they're not coaching, they're not developing, they're not mentoring, which is what leads to some of the sales shortfalls we have in it. People who sell like amateurs. And then we take the best salesperson who's figured out how to do this on their own and we move them into management. It's not like they had a great leader before them who was mentoring and coaching and holding them accountable. They just happen to be great. And so then they get in the role and they don't know what they're doing. And that's why I got excited when the publisher said, we want to do a book for first-time managers.
I think it's time for a disclaimer here, because Bill and I did an episode on should I stay or should I go? And it was one of our most downloaded episodes at the Staying in Sales. And we're talking about sales managers and the anxiety of being a sales manager. If that's your goal to be a sales manager, we do not want to discourage you. So take this information in context and not apply should I stay or should I go? Because I don't want people to start quitting because they listen to the podcast. And they're like the sales manager role. But
read Mike's book, because you'll learn how to do it, man. It's just amazing.
I mean, Bill and I always want to be relevant, and when we bring a guest on, we get many invites for people to be on the show. Rarely do we ever accept them, but when I heard Mike's name come up because Anthony Iannarino mentioned him, I go, we got to get Mike on the show. This is perfect timing. He's got a great book. We got the book. It's relevant in today's marketplace. I cannot share and tell you how relevant it is, but here's my question, Mike. Earlier you said that it was 180 degrees from being a salesperson to being a sales manager. What gifts or talents do you think made that transition easier? Instead of focusing on the opposite, what are some of the things that contributed to being a sales manager?
Yeah. So you're saying, what are the characteristics of someone who makes them a good sales manager?
Who's a good salesperson? What are some transferable skills into good sales management?
Yeah. The love of developing people. And this is going to, and the next piece I'm going to share is somewhat counterintuitive. Someone who has the ability to subdue their own ego.
Wow.
And this is a really weird tension.
Mm-hmm.
I believe, and I'm curious if you feel this way, that a somewhat oversized ego in a salesperson is not a bad thing. It keeps them emotionally healthy. Mm-hmm. It gets them through the rejection and the down times. They feel very good about themselves, and they're willing to tell you that they're good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, works to an extent, as long as they're not poisonous to the culture or they're not a prima donna on the team. But I think a healthy ego, even oversized, is okay in a sales role.
So true.
I don't think that applies when you move into management, because the high ego manager that always wants the spotlight or is craving a pat on the back or is inserting themselves, bragging in every situation, that gets old pretty darn fast. And that could kill a culture and morale. So the thing I look for in someone who wants to be successful in sales management is the EQ and the self-awareness that it's no longer about you. You don't win on your own. You don't get put on the stage. your people get put on the stage, and your job is to equip them and make them better and hold them accountable and manage them in a really smart way. And if you understand that and don't have this craving for the spotlight or to be on the top of the leaderboard or to be put on the stage getting the trophy because you made President's Club, I think that's a really good start to someone who is going to succeed in a management role. And I don't know why more people don't talk about this, because the top producers who typically get promoted and get these opportunities tend to be really driven, high ego, high achievers, and no one's coaching them on how to subdue that when they get into a leadership position. And I think it really hurts them early on in their tenure in sales management.
Now, you talk about not competing with your salespeople in the book, which I haven't really read through that whole chapter. It's actually the chapter that I'm in right now. But I also see them stealing from their salespeople and competing with their salespeople to take the big sales away from them because they can't stand to not do that. So let's talk about this attempting to do your salespeople's jobs. What do you mean by that, and what are the consequences?
Okay, well, you brought up two different things there. Let me address the first one briefly, and then we'll get into the doing their job. When I heard you say stealing their opportunities, I will tell you that is not as far-fetched as some of the listeners may think, because I've been in some organizations where I've consulted or coached where they have selling sales managers or player coaches. And I just addressed this in one of my own episodes recently. That's a really dangerous and tenuous situation where you're both selling, and a large portion of your income comes from your own production. In the insurance world, they call it, your own book, but you're also the office leader and you're supposed to be coaching and mentoring and holding people accountable. And a lot of times a big lead comes in. Well, who are you going to give it to? Right? If you're the manager and you get paid for your own production, are you going to turn that lead over to somebody else? Or are you going to keep the good ones for yourself? And in those situations, the manager is truly stealing from his or her people and creating all kinds of mistrust and hurt in the culture. So that's a whole conversation probably for another day.
That's an excuse to have you back.
Okay, there you go. I like you guys already. Plus, once you started going down the Tom Kelly path, I was ready to hear about Ron Gardenhire.
Same deal. Exactly the same deal.
I think that Twins Braves World Series from whatever year that was. I mean, I was a fan of neither team, but I can remember all of the games, and just as a huge baseball fan. So a lot of respect for the Twins, and I've got great friends up there as well. You brought up the piece about doing the salespeople's jobs. This is a problem of, I'd say, epidemic proportion. In fact, one of my big engagements a couple of years ago, the genesis of it was the company came to me and said, the previous senior executives here told the sales managers, and this company had hundreds of sales managers around the globe. The previous regime told the managers, you're the sales superhero. You got to be in every big deal. On the last day of the quarter, you should be on 3 airplanes. You should be doing this. You should be doing that. And oh my gosh, it created this untenable, unsustainable situation. The manager's job is to win through his or her people. And when you go in and you do your people's jobs, and here's the way I like to say it. I think a lot of managers are overwhelmed and they're on the edge of burnout, or they're frustrated they can't get it all done because they're doing instead of coaching, and they're doing instead of leading, and they're doing instead of holding someone else accountable. So they end up, and I get why managers do this. They're driven. They want to win. They feel the pressure, sometimes incorrectly, from executives who put the wrong pressure on them instead of getting the right people on the team and developing them and holding them accountable. The managers, because they're used to winning, just inserts themselves in everything and does everybody's job. And you run off really good talent very quickly. If you do that, you create a bizarre feeling of these codependent salespeople that are not sure whether you're doing their job or they're doing their job, right? They don't feel responsible. Some managers do this because of ego. Some do this because of fear. Some do this, and this is a dangerous one, because they know the talent on the team is not sufficient, right? And there's a deficiency. They don't have the right people in the roles, or at least not enough of them. So they over-insert themselves in opportunities, and they don't coach, they actually do. Yeah. Like when you're in a deal or a pipeline strategy conversation with the salesperson, you're not asking questions and leading them down a path to teach them. You're telling them what to do. Right. Or you're going on the meeting. You're busting the objection. You're making the presentation.
Well, I'm teaching you. I'm teaching you by doing it in front of you, and now you can emulate me the last time. That's the excuse we can have.
That's such a common excuse. And you know what? I buy that if it's the exception. I buy that when a manager says, 1 out of 5 times I need to jump in and take over. But the other 4 times I'm leading, I'm mentoring, I'm letting them do it. I'm whispering in their ear. And it's the manager that says I'm doing it to model, someone who's struggling or someone who's new. But then you watch them and it's their normal mode of operation.
Yeah.
And the challenge is the people don't get developed. It sends a really weird message to the sales team. It's really awful for the culture. And the worst thing for the manager is they become unpromotable because they're proving they're not leading anybody anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
They're just doing a lot of work. That's not exactly an attractive candidate to put into a senior leadership role. And then the poor manager ends up burning out. It destroys their home life because they've set up a situation that is neither scalable nor sustainable, right? They're not multiplying themselves, developing people. They're trying to do everything. And that is why that's such a big chapter in the book, because so many new managers don't understand that your job is not to do.
Yeah. Well, you might have this in the book, and I haven't gotten to that. But one of the things, and we see this always with new managers, I teach leadership as well. And one of the things we see is that desire to go back to do what I'm comfortable with. I don't know how to do my current job as a leader, so I'm going to go back one step and do the job that I was competent at, selling in this case, or running the CNC machine. Whatever that is, I want to go back there and take that away. And so that's one of the desires that we deal with. And you probably have that in the book. But the second thing we see too, and this is in training people, I tell people, once you take the mouse out of their hand and start clicking through it, learning stopped. Mm-hmm. Unless you're guiding them where to click with the mouse. And that's a metaphor, right? But once you've taken it out of their hands and you're doing it, they're just watching. They're not learning anymore. And those are the two key things that I'm taking away from what you're saying too.
Yeah, I love the way you said that. I think you articulated that even stronger than I do. That's super powerful. The other consequence that happens, and this is a big part of what I teach in sales management as well, the people no longer feel accountable for producing their own results because you've taken control. Mm-hmm. So the manager is carrying this enormous burden on their shoulders, all this heavy weight, thinking it's all on them. And the people go home at night and they sleep well, whether their pipeline's full or they're hitting their sales goal or not, because, well, the manager's going to cover it.
I can't do anything anyway.
Right. So that's brutal. I mean, this is accountability is a huge topic. And it's not a sexy topic. It doesn't get a lot of clicks on LinkedIn. No one's writing articles about accountability. They're writing about tech stacks and other new stuff that neither Neil Rackham or Zig Ziglar give two rips about.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And so, there's this craze. Everyone's got FOMO and they want the latest toy and tool and trick. And you know what works better than anything? Holding salespeople accountable for doing their job. Sitting down with them on a regular basis to have a formal, scheduled meeting. Will you stick the results under their nose without being a jerk, without being a micromanager? But hey, let's look at how you're doing. Sales is about results, right? Where are you, right, versus the rest of the team? Where are you against last year? Where are you against your goal? Let's talk about that for a minute.
Right.
And the act of a manager sitting down and having that conversation and then pivoting from results into the pipeline, which is the lifeblood of the business, right? It's tomorrow's cash flow. It's tomorrow's deals. And really diving in, not on activity and micromanagement crap, but are you working enough opportunities to make our number next month and for the quarter? And are you adding new opportunities? And are you advancing what's already in the pipeline? And I'm assuring these new managers, if you would understand how to do accountability well, you will be a sales management rock star, because you don't need to have a fight. You don't need to use bad words. You don't need to threaten people. And you certainly don't need to do this in a team meeting. I think you hold people accountable in private as opposed to in public. But
of course,
in the book, it's the first chapter where I give advice. It's chapter 3. And I make the case, in fact, the direct language is this: your new job as manager is nothing like your old job in sales. That's actually chapter 2. And then chapter 3, I say your number one job is making sure your people do their job. Mm-hmm. And for some reason today, there's this reluctance to hold people accountable.
Oh, I don't want to be a jerk, Mike. I don't want to be an ass. And yet they wait until they're so mad about not getting results that they become a jerk. If they would just do it on a regular basis, as you say, and as you advise in the book, sit down and have a conversation. You told me you were going to commit to doing this. Did you do that last week? Let's talk about what got in the way from you from hitting your commitments.
Bill, you're spot on. I mean, you're cracking up the professor over here. Go ahead, jump in, Scott. Yeah, I know that he just triggered you, and I love what he just said.
Oh, Bill is absolutely profound and on this particular topic. And you talked a little bit about ego being one thing that sales managers have to really check at the door. And in looking through the book, I see that you're applying some of this story branding with making the other person the hero. So that's relevant in today's marketplace. So I see that. And I'm curious, what are some of the other attributes that make a successful sales manager? So we've kind of talked about the pitfalls, some of the mistakes, the transition from salespeople to sales managers. Besides checking your ego at the door, what else does good sales managers have?
Oh, this is one that actually transfers pretty well from sales into sales management.
Yeah.
Personal productivity and time blocking. And understanding that the world may not really be aware of what you should be working on. And if you, I had a guy that I featured in the book, he's in chapter, I think it's chapter 10, getting off to a fast start. I can never remember if it's chapter 9 or chapter 10. It's hard when you get a new book because all the chapters run together.
I'll look it up.
And he's a young sales leader at SAP, recently promoted, and he's turned into a rock star. And he said this when I interviewed him. He said, you can go to all the HR meetings and do all the compliance stuff and be a good corporate citizen and help out everybody else. But at the end of the year, if you didn't make your number, you don't get a free pass because you did all the compliance things and attended all the virtual meetings. You're on the hook for results. And what that leads into is a conversation about priorities and high payoff activities and time blocking and letting some stuff slide. Because I think if a sales manager really try to do everything that they put on their plate, everything that the company suggests that you do and attend all these meetings and answer all these emails and fill out all these spreadsheets and do all this stuff, you know what there would be no time for? Working alongside your people. Coaching, getting in the car or sitting in the bullpen or listening to sales calls or going on joint calls or prepping before meetings or debriefing after meetings or running great sales team meetings that were actually energizing and equipping and, got the people going the right direction. All of that is an answer to say, Professor, the thing that translates well and transfers from sales into sales management is owning your calendar, where you go in proactively and you block out time for those highest payoff activities. And I argue that the highest payoff activities you have, I think we have two really good levers as a sales leader. One is accountability and the other one is coaching. So accountability is a short conversation where we're looking at results and pipeline and activity if necessary. And coaching is where we're working alongside somebody, or we're helping them develop skills, or we're coaching on a deal, or we're mentoring them about life or productivity or whatever the topic is, but we're proactively, intentionally working on developing our people, not just responding to a need, a fire, a big opportunity. Like, you don't get credit as a manager for going on a sales call with the biggest client, right? Or going to make some giant presentation, and you don't get credit as a sales manager for going to work with someone who's new, who doesn't even know which way is up. So you get in their car or you make some sales calls with them. Like that's table stakes.
Right.
What I'm talking about is it's kind of coaching where you go on your calendar and you go, I'm going to cycle through my entire roster of people and they're all going to get my time and attention, whether I think they need it or not. Because I want to watch them. I want to help them. I want to give them feedback. I want to help them pre-call plan. I want to help them strategize on opportunities. I want to give them some strong feedback if I don't think they're putting in the effort. Like, that's developmental coaching. And that's the first thing that I see managers cancel or postpone when the crap hits the fan or they get too busy.
Yeah, we're too busy to learn. I don't know if you've read Sales Jiu-Jitsu.
I have not.
Good book. Elliot Bayev and Daniel Moskowitz said they're really pushed for 2 hours of training every week in your sales meeting. And they're spending 2 hours every week just coaching and training and practicing and trying things. And as Scott and I say, and that's just what I really learned from them, quit practicing on your clients. Start practicing with one another so you can hone your skills and become better at what you do. And that's really the sales manager's job, to lead that every week and really focus in on getting better. But we all want to be remote and nobody wants to get together and do any work anymore.
Yeah, that's a big can of worms you just opened up. I agree 100%. You cannot spend too much time coaching your people. Well, I always say, what would happen? This is why I'm so obtuse when I'm leading a workshop for sales managers and we're working through how to do pre-call planning, which is like sales 101. Like anyone that's our age and looking at you guys, we're all the same age, right? Like
25.
We were mentored. This is how you make a sales call. This is the type of questions you ask yourself to prepare. Everything from your primary and secondary objectives through how to prepare for the personalities you're going to meet with, through the probing questions you're going to ask, through how you're going to deal with objections, to what's going on from a competitive landscape. Like, there's just good professional prep. when I'm leading a workshop for sales managers on coaching, one of the things we go deep on is pre-call preparation. And I joke with them. I say, part of the reason we have to be so serious the few times we're with our people, helping them prepare, is so hopefully some of that sticks when we're not with them. What would happen to my sales training business, my sales coaching business? And I mean this, if every sales manager truly coached their people and worked alongside them and helped them prepare and gave them feedback and model good behavior, my business might go in half and I wouldn't even care. I would applaud and salute that. Good. That's what sales managers are supposed to do.
Right. Amazing.
Earlier, one last topic is you talked about accountability, and you can't really have accountability without consequences, because I think they go hand in hand. And I always say, a good onboarding program, is clear expectations defined in writing, clear accountability scorecard, form of measurement, and third is consequences, which is if things are not done, what happens next? What are some good development consequences for sales managers if they're not really hitting it at 100%?
Yeah, for the sales managers would do with the salesperson.
That, and also the sales managers, for them to do it themselves. How can they end up creating some self consequences for their own personal professional development?
Boy, that's really powerful. I have to think about that second question. I've never been asked that.
Okay.
I think you just stumped me there, Professor. That's good.
That's for your next book.
He stumps a lot of us.
Yeah. Okay. I see why he's in charge.
Okay. I don't know.
Wait a minute. When did you get in charge, Scott?
In charge.
Here's what I'd say. Because this is a regular conversation with sales leaders. I'll use the name Johnny in my book as the underperformer.
Okay.
And I'll ask a sales manager, hey, I see that Johnny for 9 months hasn't made his number. He's last on your team right now in ranking, and he's way behind. And I know you've implemented these one-on-one accountability meetings that I preach. So what are you doing about it? When are you going to have a different conversation with Johnny? Like, how long are you going to suffer the fool gladly? Right? Definition of insanity. Same thing over and over. Nothing changes.
Right.
And the manager sometimes looks at me and goes, Mike, you don't understand. I'm like, what don't I understand? He says, well, Mike, if I sit down with Johnny and say, Johnny, we've been having this conversation for months. The trajectory you're on, the trajectory isn't good. We got to get this thing turned around, and I'm going to help you. I'm going to double up my coaching. I'm going to double up accountability. I need some double commitments from you, which is what I recommend a sales manager does when someone's been struggling for a while in a slump. And when I suggest and advocate that to the manager, they look at me and go, Mike, you don't understand. If I have that conversation with him, he might leave.
Yeah.
And my next response, I raise one eyebrow and I go, and?
Yeah.
Praise Jesus.
And thank you. And, right. And he says to me, but if he does leave, then I got the hassle of like covering his territory in the interim. And then I got to get on the recruiting bandwagon. And then I got a new guy that's all green, and I've got to get them all spooled up. And I'm like, do you want to go tell the CEO what you just told me? Right. So you're abdicating your responsibility as a leader. You're flushing down the toilet any remnants of a high performance sales culture, because if you let him hang out and don't address it, what are you telling the rest of the team? Right? They know that failure is acceptable, and you're lazy because you don't want to do your job. So if someone doesn't want to be held accountable, doesn't that tell you a lot about whether they should be in sales or not? Because if they're not willing to have you look in their pipeline, or if you confront them when they've been struggling for a long period of time, then you can, air quotes, put however long is in your world, depending on sales cycle. Something's wrong. So to your question, Scott, it's there has to be teeth. I think you both said this. There has to be some teeth in it. But what I advocate is if you're doing good accountability in a professional, non-belligerent way, at some point it becomes obvious after a few months of failing, pipelines not getting filled, results aren't there. Don't you have to change the conversation and say, hey, Johnny, something's wrong here. And if we don't get this turned around, we're going to be having a very different conversation.
Yeah.
And that's where I don't understand why managers don't do that. You said it earlier, Bill, you talked about we don't hold them accountable until we're so angry at them, we flip out.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that is like immature management. It's okay to confront underperformance. In fact, I think it's our job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What do you think about this idea, Mike? Because I know Scott and I both advocated that, and that is to have your inside salespeople being trained to become outside salespeople. So there's always the pressure. First of all, I've always got somebody as a lady in waiting ready to go into the field if I lose Johnny, the underperformer. And second of all, by knowing that person is sitting in the desk outside their office ready to take their job, Johnny might not underperform so well.
I love that. It aligns with another best practice I teach. which is you recruit ahead of the need.
Mhm.
And
Right.
that, if you have what's effectively, as you described it, an internship program where you're mentoring and developing people in one, role behind the more senior role, you've got this bench of candidates, which is fantastic. I encourage managers, that first of all, interning and developing internal people, I think is beautiful, because think of the chance for that person to hit the ground running, already knowing the business, already knowing the culture, already understanding the product for sure. Like, that's a different world.
And the customer, because they've spent their time learning the customer.
Yeah, it's perfect. But I think that's a best practice overall, is that the sales team should be aware is we're always recruiting. We're
Mhm.
always looking to add good talent. And just because you're here, it doesn't mean you get to keep your spot. You have to earn staying on this team. This is not church league soccer. This is Premier League. Like, this is not everyone gets a trophy. This is not monopoly money. Like, I say that. If I'm in a privately held company, I'm like, listen, there's an owner, there's a board, there's a bank, there's a line of credit. It's not monopoly money. If you're a public company, there's Wall Street and analysts and investors. Like, we're not playing around here. If you signed up for sales, and I say this with clear conscience as a salesperson, they let us make more money because we drive the engine. We create the revenue. If you're not willing to be accountable that you're going to produce the revenue, you don't have, you get the right to stay in this job and keep earning this money.
Right.
The reason they let us make more money is because we're willing to earn it. And they need us. We have the most important job in the economy. The sales manager who's leading the team of the people who are the tip of the spear creating revenue, like everyone else's livelihood, is depending on them doing their job well. So that's why we have to hold people accountable. And it's okay. Like, I don't like to manage by threat. And
No.
I don't want people leaving meetings uncomfortable, but I preach this. The one meeting I want a salesperson leaving with an uncomfortable feeling is the accountability meeting with their boss if they're failing. Because if a salesperson is not hitting their numbers and their pipeline is weak, I don't want them feeling good about themselves. I want them walking out of that meeting going, I better get this turned around, because it's not about self-esteem. It's about money and results. And I'm not saying to beat people up, but real salespeople are competitive. And they understand it's about results.
I'm responsible for that territory. That's an asset that we need to use well. And if I have somebody in that asset not using it well, I'm hurting the whole company.
Yeah, it's really good. That's right. And I'll just pick up one point. I have some clients where the salespeople have a very low base or no base. And I don't love that model, but in insurance, in mortgages, and some other places. And I've had executives tell me, I don't care if that person's failing. I'm not paying them.
Right.
And they say they're not doing any damage. I'm like, are you kidding me? They're breathing your oxygen. They're polluting your air. They're taking up a desk. They're sucking up resources. And you're sending a message to the rest of the team that failing's okay.
Right.
It's like, you don't tell me that because you're not paying them commission because they're failing, having them around is contributing in a positive way to your organization. It's not.
Yeah. Yeah. You
Great
don't
point.
need to get into the argument on that.
Yeah, we got him all riled up. Now we're gonna have to close.
Perfect. That's perfect. Leave him laughing.
A couple of things. Bill and I were at an event last week. Eric Hawkins did a great presentation, and one of the rules that he has is unproductive salespeople do not leave voluntarily. It's like, bing, that's so true. That is so true.
Really good.
And it's like, God, you got to really keep that in mind. So that's my last submission. My last question as we start to wrap up is I ask every guest that we have on the show, besides your books, what are the books, the authors, the people that have had the greatest impact on your life? And this is all areas besides just your career.
Oh my gosh. Well,
or you could get into your career too.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's people, you said books or people or both?
Oh, yeah. Just the most, influential person. Sometimes it's the writing of a book or something.
Yeah. I mean, my dad was a huge influence because he was a sales executive, and I told him I never wanted to go into sales. And, 3 years into my career, I moved into sales, and they all laugh at me about that now.
Yeah.
Books, the Bible,
Amen.
God's word is, I would think, the most inspiring thing for me. And I've had some great mentors, both men who were pastors, and I tell a story in one of the last chapters about being for your people. And I tell the story of one of my pastors here in this church I was a part of a while ago, and how he challenged me and pushed me and gave me leadership opportunities and would tell me the truth in love. But because he always communicated that he was for me, even when he was like rubbing sandpaper on some of my rough edges, there was this true mentoring discipleship thing going on where I knew he was for me, even when we were having hard conversations. And I use that as an example of, man, if managers would get to the heart level with some other people and they would know we're pushing on them and we're holding them accountable and we're coaching them because we think they could do more, that's powerful. So there's some influences. Anthony Iannarino, you mentioned him. He is a mentor of mine. I was friends with him before I got back in this business 13 years ago.
Wow.
And I was following him. He was blogging every day way back then.
Right, I remember.
And he was one of the people whispering in my ear when I quit my job and said, I'm going to go do this on my own. So he's a huge influence. And then there's probably too many books to name. I'll insult somebody if I give you a sales book, because I've read a lot. I'm in the middle of writing 2 different forwards right now. I think I've written 8 or 9 forwards for different sales books, and all of them are powerful.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a matter of going out and doing it, right?
Yeah.
Doing what they say. Wow, this has been terrific, Mike. Any resources you want to make available for our listeners?
Yeah, I've got a free guide. We talked a lot about accountability. There's a free guide on my website called The Fastest Way to Increase Accountability, Reduce Complacency, and Create a High-Performance Sales Culture. It's a free guide. If you're in sales leadership, I would strongly point you to get that. And then there's a bunch for people that.
So we'll link to that on the show page.
It'll be there.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I'll get and anyone who buys the book. I didn't want to repeat Sales Management Simplified, which is my management book that I wrote before this. But this is so much fresher. It's 8 years newer. It's got new stories, new examples. It's also shorter because I was able to, the first time manager sales, I was able to cut out all the extra stuff and just, here's the bare bones. I promise if you do these things, you'll win at sales management. But one of the things I did in a few chapters was I included a link to a resource page with a bunch of free guides, guides about not being a sales team hero, guides to help your people plan better for sales calls. Because I didn't think they fit in the book, but I wanted to make people have the chance to get those guides. So anyone who buys the book, you can see there's a link in there as well.
So go out and get the First Time Manager series, Sales by Mike Weinberg, and make sure you read the end of chapter 4. That's worth the whole book, which is the golf coaching story. And if that doesn't resonate with you, you shouldn't be in sales management, because that was a great story.
I love that you saved that for the end. Yeah, that story is true. And I won't retell the story here, but it's about the day that my golf coach actually went out on the course and played with me. And
Powerful.
The reason I told the story in such detail was because it was like mind blowing. I was dual processing the day as, one, this incredibly happy golf student being coached, but 2, I kept saying to myself, if sales managers would do for their people what my golf coach is doing by working alongside me, what would happen? And
wouldn't you learn just as much if he had called you and told you your metrics were out of alignment, and
that's great.
You send him the last 5 scores, and then he just tells you how to do better?
It's even better if he emails me with a questionable tone at 2:30 in the morning.
All caps.
That's how I'd really learn a lot. That's really good leadership, right?
This has been a terrific morning. Thanks so much, Mike, for joining us.
Yeah, blessings, guys.
I
Thanks
got one of my questions answered.
Oh, that's great.
All right, as we wrap up here, our golden nugget is, this is from Oscar Wilde. I got this off this talk we went to together the other day. Some cause happiness wherever they go, some whenever they go. So don't be one of those people that causes happiness when you go.
Oh God, that's such a great quote. I know I don't want to one up your quote, but I just got to share another one. Is, you cannot change the people around you. You can change the people around you. And that one is really a little tougher to get your head around, but another great quote. Everything that we talked about is winningatselling.com. You can go there. This is episode 587. Again, our guest is Mike Weinberg. I really want to encourage you to check out PSA, Professional Sales Association, psamn.org. Our next speaker is going to be talking about qualifying and making it easier to close. So go to psamn.org. Lastly, I'm really grateful for people that are in my network that are listeners. When you come up to me at an event and you say, hey, I just stumbled upon your podcast and I didn't know that was you, but I recognize your voice. And I go, I recognize that guy. So I'm really grateful for Reed to come up and share that he's listening to the podcast.
All right, a couple of quick notes for next week. Spin Selling by Neil Rackham, pages 88 through 98, the end of chapter 4. And our topic is 7 ways to demotivate your sales team. Now that I've listened to Mike, I might have 8 or 9. Might have to add a couple more to that topic. Please subscribe, share the podcast with your colleagues and on your social media, in your professional network. Go out and get better, one skill at a time.
Joyful selling.